What I'm about to tell you is something that lacks any explanation. It's the strangest occurrence that has ever taken place for me or anyone within my personal circle. I work late hours at a dive bar situated about 30 minutes from my residence. It's not really a matter of choice. It's simply how things are when you reside in a more rural area. There aren't a ton of job opportunities close to home, so you take whatever becomes available. The bar itself isn't anything remarkable, but it provides steady employment, and most evenings are largely uneventful. The evening this all occurred was no exception. My shift had passed without significant happenings. After securing everything for the night, I entered my car and commenced the drive home. Much of the return journey consists solely of a series of winding back roads. There's hardly any traffic, scarcely any lights, barely any cars, scarcely anything at all. Honestly, just long stretches of curves cutting through woods and farmland. It's typically a rather quiet drive, and frankly, I've always rather liked it for that very reason. Like a built-in decompression where I have time to zone out or reflect on the characters I met at the bar and the interesting conversations I might have had with them. Shortly into the drive, I recall thinking to myself about how unusually foggy it was. I've driven those roads more times than I can count. However, that night, visibility was worse than I'd witnessed in a while. I actually had to ease off the gas and take it slower because I could barely see more than a few car lengths ahead. Even switching on my brights didn't make a difference. It merely caused the fog to glow and reflect back at me, almost as if I were driving into a wall of white. It started to irritate me because I knew it would only add time to my trip, and I was exhausted. I was about halfway home when I detected it. Through the fog, perhaps a little off to the right side of the road, there was this faint yellow blinking light. Initially, I assumed it was just some kind of roadside marker or perhaps a reflector. But as I continued driving, it didn't really get any closer or farther away. It simply remained there, blinking at a consistent rhythm, as if it were keeping pace from somewhere deeper within the fog. The entire situation felt a little peculiar. I couldn't determine how far away it actually was. It was like the fog was playing tricks on my depth perception. After about another minute of driving with that blinking light remaining in the exact same place, I began to feel this strange sensation in my stomach. I couldn't even attempt to explain it to you. Something about it just felt wrong to me. I decided to slow down a bit, figuring that if I let off the gas, the light would continue onward, and I'd gain a better sense of what it actually was. Or it would simply carry on and vanish entirely, and I wouldn't have to deal with it anymore. But as I eased down to almost a crawl, the light didn't alter at all. It kept blinking at the same steady rhythm, still maintaining that same distance off to the side, as if whatever it was somehow matched my speed perfectly. That's when I truly began to feel spooked. I finally came to a complete stop just to see if it would do the same, and sure enough, it stayed right there, blinking in the exact same spot with the same rhythm. I sat there for a moment trying to figure out what the hell I was looking at and debating whether I should just turn around or continue driving. That's when it changed. The blinking didn't cease, but the light itself started getting brighter, like a small flame catching a sudden gust of wind and flaring up. It wasn't flashing faster. It was burning stronger with each pulse, as if whatever it was had suddenly become more active. That was sufficient for me. I wasn't about to sit there and wait for whatever that was to get any closer or weirder. I reached down to shift into reverse so I could back up and turn around. But I realized the engine wasn't running. I swear to God, it was deathly silent. I had no idea how that was even possible. The only way to kill the engine would have been touching the key, but I distinctly remember never doing that. Why the hell would I do that? At that point, my hands were shaking. And my hands never shake. I pour drinks all day. My hands can't shake. As I was desperately trying to start the car, I couldn't help but think that this thing outside my car might have something to do with my engine, which, of course, wouldn't start. I tried the ignition again and again. The engine was completely dead. Meanwhile, that blinking yellow light kept burning brighter and brighter and brighter, almost as if it were feeding off something. My pulse was racing at that point. I had no idea what the hell was going on, and there was no one around for miles. Not knowing what else to do, I reached for my phone, figuring perhaps I could at least get some video of it or call for help. But as soon as I tapped the screen, nothing happened. Completely black. My phone had died. I knew for a fact I still had at least 20%. I had literally checked it back at the bar before I closed up, but now it was as dead as the engine. Before I could do anything else, the light suddenly flared to a blinding brightness like an exploding star. I physically couldn't keep my eyes open. That's how bright it was. I threw my arms up in front of me and kept my eyes shut for 10 seconds at least, feeling the intense heat of what was now a massive light source. And then, just like that, it was gone, as if it had never been there in the first place. The fog was still thick, but there was nothing out there anymore. My heart was still pounding, but I instinctively reached for the ignition one more time, and this time the engine turned over like normal. I didn't waste another second. I drove the rest of the way home with my eyes glued to the road, as if looking away for even a second would bring that awful light back. But nothing else happened that night. Nothing ever happened again. Actually, I've told this story to just about everyone I know, my family, friends, even a couple regulars at the bar, but no one's had an explanation that sits right with me. And trust me, I've heard every theory you could think of. Story 2. This occurred a couple years back. I'm a long-haul truck driver. I've been doing this for years now, so I've become pretty accustomed to the long stretches of nothing. This particular night, I was on my second-to-last delivery of a cross-state loop, just trying to finish it so I could get home. The route had me cutting through one of those desert highways that barely see any traffic at night. No towns for miles, no gas stations, barely even any lights. Just a 2-lane road slicing through open desert under a sky full of stars. It's the kind of drive where you start to feel like you're the only person left on the planet. I was about an hour out from my next drop-off when I first noticed it. I glanced into one of my side mirrors and was somewhat surprised to see a dark SUV back there trailing me. It wasn't riding my bumper or anything aggressive like that. It was actually keeping a pretty wide distance, but it was definitely following. No matter how fast or slow I went, it adjusted to match. For nearly 40 minutes, it just lingered there in my mirrors, always visible, always keeping that same strange gap. It never tried to speed up or pass, just sat back there as if it were waiting for something. At first, I figured it was a driver who was hesitant to pass me. Maybe they thought it was illegal or dangerous. But I dismissed that theory after driving through several passing zones. I suppose it was possible they didn't know what a passing zone was, but I considered that rather unlikely. As much as I was dying to know what was going on, I had a job to do. I couldn't afford to dedicate the whole night to figuring out what the person behind me's problem was, so I tried to ignore it. As much as I tried, though, I couldn't help but glance at its car every so often. It was really starting to bother me, which is something I rarely ever experience. Around 2 a.m., I decided to pull off at a small roadside rest area. It wasn't a full truck stop or anything like that, just a dirt lot with a few faded parking spaces and a little shed with a couple of vending machines. There were also no external lights in the entire lot, except for one dim bulb flickering above the vending machines. I figured I'd stretch my legs for a minute, grab a soda, and more importantly, let whoever was behind me pass. But when I glanced back before shutting off the engine, I saw that SUV pull in too, parking way off in the far corner of the lot. At that point, whatever confusion or unease I was feeling became pure anger. Whoever was driving that SUV was about to get a piece of my mind. I aggressively stepped down from the cab and started making my way over to the car, not even trying to disguise my annoyance. But as I was stomping my way over there, whoever was inside must have realized that I was about to confront them, because before I could even get close, the SUV's engine suddenly flared to life, and they peeled out of the spot like they were running from the police, kicking up a huge cloud of dust and gravel. As they sped past me, I tried to catch a glimpse of the individual who was behind the wheel, but the windows were tinted and I couldn't make anything out. I watched as the car got back on the highway, tires still screeching. Within seconds, it was gone. Just a flicker of red tail lights that quickly receded into nothingness. Part of me was relieved. I wouldn't have to deal with that annoyance anymore, and I could finally go about my night in peace. But another part of me was deeply disturbed. I had basically confirmed to myself that whoever was driving that car had been following me for some unknown reason. And what's worse, they clearly didn't want me approaching their vehicle. So their intentions must have been hostile. As I was returning from the vending machines, which coincidentally were completely unstocked, making that a huge waste of time, I only then realized how exhausted the whole encounter had made me. My energy was drained, and the last thing I wanted to do was get back on the road. I figured I'd earned at least a short break after all that. Just a quick nap, an hour or two to recharge before finishing the route in the morning. I did a quick walk around the rig. I made sure the cargo doors were still locked, and everything was secured tight, then climbed back into the cab. I reclined my seat, cracked the window slightly to let some air in, and settled in for a bit of rest. The lot was dead quiet by that point, and for the first time all night, I actually started to relax. My reasoning was that even if that person did mean me harm, there's no way they'd turn their vehicle around just to continue harassing me. Even if they did want to come back, finding the lot again would be nearly impossible. They'd have to search blindly in the middle of a pitch-black desert. The combination of my exhaustion and newfound comfort made falling asleep really easy. If I had to guess, I'd say I fell asleep that night in a matter of minutes. I should probably mention that I'm a really light sleeper. Like really light. You kind of have to be in this line of work. Sleeping in potentially unsafe roadside places so often builds a sixth sense, so to speak. If someone's messing with your rig while you're asleep, your entire livelihood could be at stake, not to mention your life. So yeah, the ability to wake up to even faint sounds could be the difference between job and no job, life and death. Maybe an hour after falling asleep, as I suspected, I was awakened by the faintest little noise, a light crunching sound like footsteps pressing into the loose gravel. Even though I was still groggy, I had enough presence of mind to remain quiet. I peeked through the corner of one of my window blinds to look outside, and sure enough, there were two figures standing near the rear wheels of my trailer. They were crouched down low, inspecting the lower latch mechanisms as if they were trying to figure out how to open them without making too much noise. They were keeping pretty quiet, but I noticed one of them had a small flashlight using it to signal back and forth to the other. I couldn't make out any faces, but it was clear as day what they were doing. I didn't have any weapon on me. I usually don't, but if it came down to it, I was fully prepared to defend my rig and load. That's my life. As I watched, one of the individuals reached into a small bag and pulled out what looked like a pair of bolt cutters. That was it. Without even thinking, I slammed my palm down on the horn, sending the truck's air horn blaring. Their reaction was instantaneous. Both men jumped as if they'd been struck by lightning, and they scrambled back towards the roadside brush. Not even 10 seconds later, I saw headlights appear out of nowhere. It was that same SUV from earlier, this time roaring back into view with its lights still off before whipping around and disappearing into the night again. I never even had time to step out of my cab before the whole thing was over. After things settled down a bit, I called the police. Honestly, I was mostly just calling to report the incident and get it on record, but they insisted I stay put until a unit could get there to check things out. It took a while, but eventually 2 officers showed up and helped me inspect the truck. Sure enough, there were fresh pry marks along one of the lower lock arms on the back of my trailer, right where those individuals had been tampering. Fortunately, they hadn't gotten it open. The officers told me they'd encountered this kind of thing before. Cargo thieves. Apparently, it's a lot more common along that corridor than most people realize. They figured the SUV had been following me for a while, waiting for the right moment to strike. This remains the most unsettling thing that has ever happened to me. Story 3. There's nothing quite like a night drive, particularly in the summer. Imagine this. The warm summer breeze flowing through the open windows of a speeding car, cutting through empty stretches of endless highway. Well, that's what it's like around my area. Anyway, there aren't a lot of cars out on the highway at night. No police either. So I essentially have free rein to drive how I please. And trust me, I take full advantage of that. My dad's BMW M3 definitely facilitates that too. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a reckless driver or someone who drives at criminal speeds, but I do enjoy experiencing the full capabilities of German engineering from time to time. This night was one of those times. I was fully engaged in joyriding, cruising along the highway without a care in the world. Stereo turned off and passenger seat empty. My attention was focused not on music, but on two other things: the beautiful sounds of my car and the rush of the air around my face. Driving like this is one of the only things that makes me feel truly free. I'm not sure what came over me, but at one point I had this overwhelming urge to pull off the highway and cut through some back roads where I could really appreciate the car's handling. It's like when you get a really strong urge to do something and you don't really know why, but you do know that you won't be able to rest at night if you don't satisfy it. That's exactly what it was like. So I did exactly that. I pulled off at the next exit and started cutting through a network of back roads, weaving through whatever neighborhood I had ended up in. The roads were narrow and filled with tight bends, precisely the kind of driving I was looking for. I let the car open up a bit, taking the turns with just enough speed to feel the tires grip and release. The streets were completely deserted. It was just me, the car, and the road. That is, until I spotted a flicker of light in the road up ahead and slammed on the brakes just in time to barely avoid colliding with it. Once I came to a stop, I finally got a clear look at what I had almost struck. It was a shopping cart just sitting there in the middle of the road, as if someone had deliberately placed it there. The way my headlights reflected off the metal bars must have been what caught my eye and made it appear more sudden than it actually was. Still, it completely took me aback. I mean, it's not exactly normal to find a random shopping cart sitting dead center in the middle of a back road at close to midnight. Against my better judgment, I put the car in park, turned on my hazards, and stepped out to take a closer look. I probably should have just kept driving, but my curiosity got the better of me. The whole situation just felt so random and out of place that I had this odd need to make sense of it. The night air hit me immediately, warm but a little buggy, and the only sound was my cooling engine making the classic BMW ticking sound. I walked up to the cart, unsure of what I'd find inside. Groceries, perhaps? No, that was ridiculous. I mentally scolded myself for even entertaining such a foolish thought. I peered inside the cart and realized it was completely empty. Just an ordinary metal shopping cart sitting in the middle of the road. I stood there for a few seconds, but when it became apparent there was nothing unusual about the cart itself, I turned to head back toward my car. That's when I saw out of the corner of my eye two dark figures suddenly emerged from the farmland beside the road. They were sprinting full speed coming straight toward me. It took my brain a second to even process what I was seeing, but in that moment, it was life or death. My options were either to act or face the consequences. I bolted back to my car and essentially slammed the start button. The car came to life as those figures reached my car window. One of them stopped a few feet from my car, but the other sprinted directly into my passenger side door, coming to a deafening thud. He didn't even flinch. It was as if my car were invisible. That's how fast he had been running. He didn't even brace himself for the impact. The two of us locked eyes, and all the confidence I just had was instantly gone. I was frozen. He stared at me with two beady, bloodshot eyes. His clothes were torn as if he'd been running through thick brush or barbed wire, and his hair was messy and wet. His face was smeared with something dark, dirt, blood, or perhaps both. He had this unsettling expression on his face that wasn't exactly a scowl, but wasn't exactly a smile either. I've never been more terrified in my entire life. It was profound. There was blood gushing from somewhere on his body, but he didn't seem to care or even notice. He must have realized I wasn't going anywhere because he started fumbling with the door handle, trying to force the door open. That's what did it for me. I snapped back to reality, maneuvered the car around the shopping cart, and sped out of there. I was utterly conflicted the whole drive home. Not only was I still shaken up and scared, but part of me also felt like that individual needed help for his injuries and wasn't going to get it. I debated going back to see if he needed help, but ultimately decided against it. Instead, I reported the incident to the police while still driving, and they said they'd send someone over to the spot I described to check it out. When I finally made it back home, I parked in the driveway and got out to inspect the car. I needed to know how bad the damage was. That's when I noticed there was blood splattered across the entire passenger side door, far more than I had expected. It was streaked along the side mirror, smeared across the handle, even dotting part of the rear quarter panel. There was also a slight dent near the center of the door, just barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. The quantity of blood, though, that's what really got to me. It was far more than I would have expected from that brief collision. It was an inhuman amount of blood. The next morning, my dad took one look at the car and completely lost it. He didn't even give me a chance to explain before he started going off, yelling about how irresponsible I was, how I should have never taken the car out that late, and how much it was going to cost to fix the paint and the dent. I kept trying to tell him that it wasn't my fault, that something happened out there that I couldn't have possibly predicted, but he wasn't having it. To him, all he saw was his car covered in blood with a dented door, and that was enough. I may as well have hit a deer for all he cared. He eventually did come to understand what had happened, and he was actually pretty sympathetic, but not until after I got the car cleaned up. And let's just say that was one of the last times he let me go joyriding after dark. I'm fairly certain I can rationalize everything that happened. Those individuals, likely homeless, had attempted to lure some unsuspecting person out of their car with a shopping cart. I had been that unsuspecting person that night. They simply hadn't been fast or stealthy enough to get the drop on me before I could get out of there. I never heard back from the police, but I wasn't really expecting to. Part of me feels like I shouldn't care, but I truly hate thinking that hitting my car might have ended someone's life that night.